Hey, chat.
Yeah.
What's up? Give me a 5x5 status check. Can you hear me? Am I pretty? Don't answer that. Let me know that everything's working correctly here, because as promised, we've got another aircraft to share with you. We're standing underneath the tail of a PBY Catalina, and we are about to go aboard and talk with some of the crew that operate, fly, and maintain her. So let me know that everything's okay. Not pretty, that's so rude. That's so rude. I don't even, gosh, really? Jeez, it's ugly by ugly. I asked for it, I guess.
You
I
did.
Totally asked for
you
that.
walked into that.
I walked right into that one. So after we make sure that the signal's stabilized, everything's good to go. If you're wondering what's going on, like what is this live stream, where's my Fortnite? I'm Das. I'm hosting a virtual field trip. We're out in Duxford, UK right now for the 75th commemoration of D-Day. So Duxford was one of the major airports where they staged the D-Day liberation, the D-Day operation, I guess you could say. And we have been walking around here all day, live streaming our virtual field trip to you on Twitch. So I am reading Twitch chat on my phone on occasion. I'm not being rude, I'm not being bored, I'm actually reading things. And we are going to be here all week, checking out different aircraft. Actually, not here all week. We're going to be overseas all week. Couple days here at Duxford, couple days across the channel down in France, doing all sorts of historical learning operations for the 75th commemoration of D-Day. With me, I've got JDK Winnikin right here. He is actually, I keep saying historical expert. I'm okay with it.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, so we have been walking around here learning about planes, talking with air crews, doing all sorts of cool educational outreach stuff here. I know it's not the normal content, but we're back. I think we can go ahead and go on board now. Are we clear to go on board?
I think we're clear to go on board anytime.
All right, well let's go ahead and take the live view solo in our camera rig here and see if we can get aboard. So let's go ahead and get started. What's your name?
So my name's David Legg.
David Legg.
Yeah.
All right, and what do you do with the aircraft?
So I normally fly as one of 2 or 3 crew chiefs.
Right.
And basically the airplane has to fly with a minimum crew of 3. So we have 2 pilots, captain, co-pilot, and a crew chief.
Right.
And the crew chief really is there to assist the pilots, because there are certain things that when we're flying, if you need to do them, they can't be done from the cockpit.
Right.
So, for example, if the undercarriage fails to come down, clearly not good.
Not good.
You cannot resolve that from the cockpit.
Okay.
And you could try cycling it again and see if it works, but if it fails to come down, that's the sort of thing the crew chief has to sort out.
So you say sort out, is there like a crank somewhere that you...
Yeah, in a way. I mean, the main undercarriage, if you need to put it down manually, you literally push it to start. You open a little hatch, give it a push.
You just give it a push?
But it doesn't lock in position, so then you use a tool to crank it back so that it locks. The nose wheel is a very different procedure, much more complicated.
Okay.
So basically you have to have someone on board that can do that without leaving the cockpit.
Run nose to tail and work on things like that.
Yeah.
So that's what a crew chief does.
So that's why we fly with a third person.
Gotcha.
And for want of a better expression, they call them the crew chief.
They call it's like the guy that runs around and does stuff.
If we go away to we basically fly air shows all over Europe. That's our main bread and butter work.
Yeah.
So normally we'll fly with a team of people, so probably 6 people.
Right.
So the crew chief then is there really to just make sure the team are doing the right stuff. You know, they're not doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. I mean, we work really well as a team, but it's down to the crew chief just to make sure that things are done in a methodical, safe way.
Gotcha. So how many people do you have on the team? You say there's 3 if you're minimum of 3 if you're operating. How many? You have like 20 people, 30 people?
In total,
in the group.
Well, in the group,
Yeah.
we reckon it takes about 45 to 50 people to run the operation and keep the aeroplane flying.
Right.
So we have 20 shareholders, because the aeroplane's owned by shareholders. We then have a full-time engineer, a secretary who does all the air display bookings for us, and then we have a group called the Cat Pack, who are volunteers, and basically we're volunteers, and they do maintenance work over the winter and take it in turns to travel around to shows with the aeroplane. So that brings you up to like 45, 50 people.
Okay.
So some of those people are putting money into it.
Right.
Some aren't, like me. And the reward, apart from being involved in something that's really great, is that we get to fly.
Yeah. I'm gonna say it's okay because you're the guy who puts down the gear if they don't come down. So we give you a pass on the.
Yeah.
You're pretty important. So operating the aircraft. I mean, it's a historical aircraft.
Yep.
What was this sort of aircraft used for? I mean, I'm in this big bubble right quick.
So
I can see out of it.
So the original design goes back to the mid-30s. The prototype flew in 1935, and it was built as a maritime maritime patrol aeroplane. That was the original design. Come the Second World War, they were then used for anti-submarine warfare, convoy escort, and in some countries they were used also for air-sea rescue.
Okay.
And originally the design was a pure flying boat. What I mean by that is it didn't have wheels.
It didn't run on the runway ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
non-amphibious.
Gotcha.
But then part of the way through production, the Americans decided they'd like the flexibility of an amphibious undercarriage. So total production, roughly half were pure flying boats, half were amphibians. Obviously the one we're in is an amphibian.
Is that why it's a 5A?
Very good. It is. Well, the A
He
is...
told me earlier. He told me the answer earlier.
Could have sold that.
I could have sold that.
Could have sold that.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest.
No,
Like-
that's true. Well, that's very good. So it started with the PBY-1.
Okay.
And then the design was gradually improved, and eventually they got up to the 6A.
The 6A. Okay.
This one was actually built in Canada. So in reality, this one started life as what was called a Canzo A.
Okay.
A for amphibians still. But
Right.
the Canadians have a habit of calling aeroplanes by different names to everyone else.
Right.
So they called the Catalina the Canzo. So this was built as a Canzo. And you ask about the blisters. These aren't the originals, but there's
Right.
a picture
They're like
here.
tinted. This is the upgrade, luxury
It
upgrade.
is. There's a picture of the original blister.
Okay.
Um,
So yeah, I just put it
Okay.
straight over there.
and you
Yeah.
can see that instead of being one piece, it's got a frame. And the middle part of the frame opened up kind of like an eyelid.
Oh.
So round like that.
Okay.
And then you'd swing a gun out either side.
Really?
They-
Was it one gun that would go to either side, or a
No,
gun
one
on
each-
each side?
one each
on each
side.
side. Okay, gotcha.
And it was also the way that when you were on the water, this was the easiest way to get into the aeroplane.
Really?
So you'd open the blisters from the outside, roll
sort
them
of-
up, and then climb in. So, yeah. So this one is 75 and a half years old.
75 and a half years
First
old.
flew in 1943.
Wow.
Built in Canada, as I said. Served with the Royal Canadian Air Force. And they held on to it after the war, turned it into a transport aeroplane and also a photographic survey.
Right.
And they held on to it till the late 50s. And then it was sold on the commercial market and it became a forest firefighter, water bomber.
Wait, really?
Yeah. So
Would it pick up water?
exactly. So in the centre, on the centre of gravity, it had a big 400-gallon water tank.
Right.
And kind of like drain pipe scoops would come down once you land on a lake. The probes they're called.
Right.
Scoops would come down into the water. The water would be forced up the pipes
Into the tank. Yeah.
and then you take off, and then the underside of the hull had literally like bomb doors. And
Right.
Open them up in the water, and then go
Follow
onto
the
the fire,
target, yeah.
Close the doors, back to the lake, fill up, round and round and round.
Amazing.
Ad nauseum.
Amazing.
I didn't know they used Catalinas for that. I didn't know.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, really, I mean, Catalinas were the first seaplanes really to be used for firefighting.
Right.
And if you look at, I mean, now they use converted airliners. But,
Sure.
But in Canada, in particular, there was a design called the Canadair 215, and that was literally almost a redesign of the Catalina, except they squared off all the nice round
Yeah.
edges. So
They
it's
did.
a boxy hull.
Like a boxy hood. It's,
Big
it's such a
tank.
nice looking plane, though.
Yeah,
Like, God.
but in reality, they were almost identical in concept.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, except they had fixed floats, whereas our floats.
Retract into the wing.
Exactly.
Yeah. We had looked at those earlier, Chad. If you were here at the beginning of the day, we were looking at the outside of the aircraft. Now we're on the
Yes,
inside of the aircraft.
Exactly. And the floats, in fact, they're going back to the undercarriage. The undercarriage is hydraulic.
Right.
The floats are electric.
Okay.
And I've never had to put the undercarriage down in an emergency for real, but I have had to do the floats up. Because normally what we do when we fly a display, we'll do like a figure-of-8 racetrack pattern.
Right.
And at one point we'll come round towards the crowd, and when we head onto the crowd, we'll put the floats down.
Floats down.
And on this occasion, they didn't go back up again.
Yeah. Go ahead, y'all. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're just hanging out right here in the main
Welcome
thoroughfare.
aboard.
Active facility.
So yeah, basically the circuit failed, the servo had burnt out, so the floats were down, and you can't land on land with the floats
With the floats down.
because they're too close to the ground.
Yeah.
And if you had a gust of wind and you do something like called a ground loop,
Yep.
where you spin around with one wing down, it'll do
If it makes contact, it'll damage it or flip you. Yeah.
So I have done that for real. And the way you do that is basically there's like a Model T Ford crank.
Right.
I'll show you it later. and you basically shove one end into a hole. Very technical.
Shove a crank into a hole.
And then you wind like crazy. And when you can't wind anymore, you take it out of the hole, put it in the hole above it, because it's geared, and you start again.
You start again.
And when you can't do that anymore, you know that, well, you hope they're fully up. The problem is that when you're doing it, you can't see what's happening. So you're reliant on the pilots.
That's inconvenient.
Yelling encouragement.
Look backwards, yell encouragement.
So I have done that before. At a show in France.
Wow.
So we just had to go off, not declare an emergency, but just declare a problem.
Declare I need to crank this up.
So we just fly off somewhere and sort ourselves out.
Yeah.
So I have done that, but I've never done the gear.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a firefighting plane for a while.
Yes,
And then
okay.
how did it get to here?
Okay, so it flew as a firefighter in France, in Canada and Chile. It ended up in Saskatchewan flying as a firefighter. It was then retired.
Yeah.
And this would have been in the mid-90s. And it ended up at a place called Nanaimo on Vancouver Island.
Okay.
It was going to be used for tourist flights in Zimbabwe with Malaysian money. And the Malaysians took fright because of the political situation in Zimbabwe, so they just abandoned it. And the aeroplane ended up sitting with the one that we were talking about earlier on in America.
Right.
Yeah, at Evergreen.
At Evergreen.
At Evergreen.
Yeah.
So this one was sitting with that
Yeah,
one?
Yes,
they
we'll
were
see what that
sister
one-
aircraft. They had almost a parallel history. And they both ended up sitting in the car park at Nanaimo, getting in worse and worse condition. We'd operated a previous aeroplane, but it had an accident with it, so we needed to buy another one.
Right.
And we chose the better of the two, which was this one. Fully restored it.
Ouch.
Fully restored it, and then flew it from Nanaimo to the UK. So that was in 2003. And since then, I mean, obviously we've done work on it, but basically in that time, we've flown air shows all over Europe. And that's our bread and butter work. We
Yeah.
do that all the time. We've got long range, so we can fly. I mean, we flew out of Turkey for an air show last year, which was great. But occasionally we do other work as well. So the last time we did something like that was about 4 years ago.
Right.
And we took a party of sixth formers, so that's senior students
Okay.
in a private school. The aeroplane picked them up from a lake or a loch in Scotland and flew them via Iceland to Greenland for an expedition.
Okay.
So the plane was full of stuff, 2 rubber dinghies, outboard engines, I think. Rifle.
A rifle?
Polar bears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff was on the home part of the trip. So we took them to Greenland, and then the idea was we'd fly them out to a big lake in 2 parties, leave them on the lake with the outboard boats, and then they went off to the shore. They spent the best part of 3 weeks on an expedition, climbing mountains and avoiding polar bears and all sorts of other stuff. And then we took the aeroplane to Iceland,
Right.
back to Iceland. It's easier to leave it there. It was much easier for the pilots to get home.
Yeah.
And then 3 weeks later, another crew flew back out, commercial, picked it up at Reykjavik, flew it back to Constable Point in Greenland,
pick 'em up.
picked up the same number of students,
Good. That's good.
tick that box, and teachers, and the teachers,
The teachers.
and then
The rifle worked.
and then flew them back to the UK.
Wow.
So that's not the sort of work we do. Well, we don't do that very often.
Right.
It's good work if we can get it, because usually it can be quite remunerative if you get your quotes right.
Right. Right.
But our day-to-day job is air shows. And,
So they actually hired you for that?
Yeah.
Is that the right way to say it? I don't
they
know if that's
chartered
right with it.
yeah.
They
and the crew, they chartered.
Yeah, they chartered
the whole thing.
So not just like
Whole
covering the cost, but covering operating the
Absolutely.
aircraft, maybe some restoration stuff you need.
And this organisation worked with them for a couple of years or so on the planning.
Wow.
It's a long story as to how it came about. I won't
But
bore you,
still.
It is an interesting story.
So if you need to charter an amphibious aircraft,
We're the team.
yeah, we know some guys actually. If you need to charter an amphibious aircraft for an expedition,
But it's an interesting situation because what in this country, what we cannot do, the aeroplane's on the British Register. And
Right.
What we cannot do is say, come flying with us, we'll charge you £500.
Right.
We cannot fly for reward.
okay.
So we don't have what's called a public transport certificate of airworthiness. So we just cannot, in any form,
Gotcha.
take remuneration
Yeah.
in exchange for flights.
Makes sense.
Unless the whole thing is chartered as a package.
Ah, like the whole aircraft as opposed
we
to
can
just
fly people,
a seat.
We can fly people for free.
Right.
But obviously, financially, there's no future.
There's no future in
Right.
flying people for free.
so we don't do that. But we are able to take people flying.
Okay.
But we cannot charge for it.
Do you have like I'm going to say foundation? You said there's 20 people that own the aircraft, but do you like take donations to keep the plane flying, or is it all your own?
Yeah, empty your pockets. No, we do.
Give me your money now.
So when we go to air shows, for example,
Right.
we'll open up the plane. I mean, today's pretty quiet, but some days we'll open up the plane and we'll have a constant stream of people coming in. £5 a head for as a donation.
Okay.
And we show them through. You know, we have a chat, probably not as long as this chat, but they get a good idea of what the aeroplane looked like in wartime.
Yep.
Go and see the front end, and go away hopefully happy.
No kidding.
And we sell T-shirts and
All sorts of
hats
little
and that
things
sort of
to
stuff.
help defray the cost of operating the aircraft.
We also have I suppose you call it a fan club, really, a supporters club called the Catalina Society, which brings in some income. So we've got about 500 members, and they join for a fee. It's an annual fee, or you can join as a life member.
Gotcha.
They get an illustrated magazine twice a year, and
More than I get for most stuff.
a lot of people enjoy that. They get benefit from it. We get a small amount of income, but it all helps.
Everything helps defray cost of operating the
Yeah.
aircraft, because aircraft aren't cheap to operate, as it
They
turns
are
out.
absolutely not. No.
So
And it's not just the direct operating costs. There's lots of on costs. There's
Sure.
insurance. There's massive paperwork. And
All the regulatory costs.
obstacles.
Yeah.
It seems I think generally in life, very few things actually get simpler or easier. they just get more difficult.
they get more complicated,
And
right?
operating old airplanes doesn't get easier.
Doesn't get easier. Do you have like a website or someplace
Yes,
where we
we
can
do.
find you?
Yeah, so www.catalina.org.uk.
Catalina.org.uk. Somebody get a link to that and put it up in
Yeah.
chat. And if there's a link to donate to them, maybe post that in chat as well.
Yeah,
because
there is a donation.
there is like a
tab
little
on
button
my
on there.
website,
Yeah. So again, y'all, this craft keeps flying because people believe in it and want it to keep flying. And one of the reasons that it's able to keep flying is because money, right? It takes money.
Yep.
It doesn't fly from the goodness of anybody's heart.
No.
But
money and enthusiasm.
money and enthusiasm,
Yeah.
right?
And we are all Catalina obsessives to a lesser or greater degree.
So there we go. We have the catalina.org.uk, make a donation. If anybody in chat wants to support these awesome fellas that are out here making us able to come in and check out the aircraft, they didn't charge us a $5 to step on board, but click on the link, maybe toss them 5 curly L's or whatever you got to just help
stuff.
defray the cost of this.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I got to do a little bit of a throw to help y'all out, you know?
Yeah,
It's part
appreciate
of,
it.
we know how it is. So what else should we do while we're inside? Is there like a...
Well, you
go
can
look
come and have a
around?
look at the front end. I mean, just briefly, I mentioned
yeah.
that there were 2 guns at the back.
Right.
The stairs are a modern
like an
adaptation.
adaptation,
But,
okay.
Originally, many Catalinas, not all, but many of them had a rear firing gun.
I was going to say, yeah.
And then, as you go forward, there were bunks, there was a galley. Further forward, there was a navigator with his chart table.
Charts,
There was
okay.
a radio operator, and a bit later on, a radar operator.
Okay.
Some versions. A flight engineer sat in what's called the pylon between the top of the hull and the bottom of the wing.
Okay.
And he operated the floats from there, and he operated various engine and fuel controls. And so, in operational use, the aeroplane flew with anything from 8 to 10 or 11 crew.
Right.
Because sometimes they would take a spare crew along because this aeroplane was capable of such long flights.
Yeah.
18, 19 hours. was
18.
routine.
That's why we have a galley, right?
So, yeah, exactly. And a toilet.
And a toilet. There
Just
you go.
sitting on it.
This is wait, really?
Where it was.
Where it was. Okay, it's not currently installed.
So the whole thing about the aeroplane was it wasn't a fast aeroplane, but it had a great deal of range. It could fly long distances over a long period.
Right.
So it was
An
absolutely
endurance sort of thing.
Endurance.
Yeah.
It was ideal for Atlantic convoy escorts, that kind of anti-submarine warfare. So So it had a big crew.
Yep.
But as I explained earlier on, now we fly with a minimum crew of 3.
Of 3, just the 2
If we-
pilots and
yeah.
the chief.
If we're doing an air display, and again I said, that's mainly what we do.
Right.
Then when we fly an air display, it's also a maximum crew of 3, because you don't have personnel on board who don't have a function.
Right.
That's a safety thing.
You also don't want to have to buy them dinner afterwards, so you just minimum.
So the great thing about being a crew chief,
Yeah, is that you have to be on
get
board.
to fly the air shows.
It's one of the critical positions at
Yeah.
the air show. So
Absolutely. So and that's a great privilege.
Yeah.
It's tremendous.
Absolutely.
So,
Are these seats up here? These look like airliner
yeah,
seats that
they're
are.
British Airways Boeing 737s.
Really?
They were, yeah. So obviously non-original.
Yeah.
But because we fly crew, a crew of 6, for example, to air shows, they've got to sit somewhere. So
Yeah.
they want some comfort.
Yeah. So when so there's some people up here
Yeah,
that might be coming back at some point.
Yeah, and then we'll go up the front.
And then we'll go up to the front.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm doing it in reverse.
Sure, you flip it over?
Thank you so much.
So we'll go up there in a moment.
Yes, sorry, Chad. I know I call them curly L's. I'm from Texas in the United States. I know it's the British pound. I'm aware of what it actually is, but I say curly L's. I apologize. Everybody's making fun of me with the currency.
Curly L's.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a fancy curly L.
Back in the day, when we had pound, shillings, and pence, we called
Yeah.
it LSD.
LSD.
Because it was pounds, shillings, and the D.
And the D
for
was
pence.
the-
Don't ask me why. We can say, well, why wasn't it P? It was D. D
yeah.
for pence.
LSD's a better joke.
It's a better joke.
LSD, yeah.
They were thinking ahead. So what we're going to do here, y'all, we're going to shuffle around a little bit. There's some other people up in the front, and as they come back this way, we'll stand up. They'll hang out here in the blisters and in the sort of observation couches here, or whatever you want to call it. And then we'll go up to the front of the craft. Really tight space. I don't know if we're going to need a light or not, so I'm actually going to grab a flashlight while we're going. Yeah, we'll see, but give us just a second. We won't turn the camera off, but we are going to be shuffling things around. It's a live, active environment, right?
Okay. So obviously here we're amidships.
Yep.
It's a lot narrower here than it would have been on the early Catalinas that didn't have an undercarriage.
Right.
Basically, they had to narrow the hull because the wheels come up and sit on the outside of the hull.
Right.
So it's much narrower on the amphibious version than the original.
Because the walls on either side are
Exactly,
basically the
yeah.
gear come up
And
against it.
the gear splits, folds like that, and
Yep.
part of it comes up into this tube.
It's like a big
Yeah, it just
piston or
sits on
something?
the
It
outside.
just sits on the outside.
It's not covered at all.
Right.
And these are interesting. I mean, these are the control runs.
Right.
So you've heard of, our age is fly-by-wire.
Fly-by-wire.
Their age is fly-by-cable.
Wow.
So when you manoeuvre the aeroplane, every control surface that you move from the cockpit will be activated by a cable.
Via the cables.
So these are going down to the back, and they're operating the rudder and the elevators. It was the same with the ailerons out on the wing. And I mentioned the flight engineer originally. He sat up here.
Oh, really?
So he had a seat in what we call the pylon, and he could see the engines either side.
Out
He
either side
but
there.
he basically up here, he had his own instrument panel.
Right.
So he could communicate with the captain and co-pilot, but he would operate the fuel system. These are the fuel pumps.
That's the fuel pumps right there.
Yeah, but he operated them from here, and he also operated the floats
Okay.
when they went down.
Where's the fuel stored? Is the fuel stored in the wings
Just in
or
the wing.
just
Yeah.
in the wings?
You just pour it straight into the wing.
Straight into the wings.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not down low like
No,
this,
no,
it's
no,
actually up high.
Up the top.
All right.
So you have to, when you refuel it, you have to climb up onto the top of the wing, and then the fuel goes in from
We saw that earlier.
2 tanks.
Yeah, we actually saw that.
That's the crank I mentioned earlier on.
This is the infamous crank.
Get the floats down there,
Yeah.
and that's where they go.
There's the two.
Yep.
So does it do both at the same time?
No, you just, both floats.
Yeah,
yes,
both floats
yes,
at the
it
same
does.
time. Okay.
Yeah. And basically that's manual, so
Right.
it's just on a gear.
It's just gears in there and it has
Both
something that goes out to both sides.
But
Yeah.
normally, they're electric, so
Right.
they go down and they go up and
That's just in case you need the pump, right?
Exactly.
Or sorry, the
Just
crank.
the override.
Yeah.
But they go up and down pretty quickly when they're electrically driven.
Yeah.
But when you use this, it's pretty slow. It's 150 turns
150 turns between the two holes, or
in total.
in total? All right. So remember, he said when you crank it, you just crank it until it won't crank anymore, and you switch holes and you keep cranking it again. Wow.
And it's on a ratchet, so it won't undo itself.
Right? All right, a little bit more room in here. We'll get the camera through. I'll spot you, dude. Good. You're clear. Yep, you're good. All right,
So
cool.
in this section of the aeroplane, originally, this housed the navigator and the radio operator.
All right.
So they, between the two of them, they took up quite a lot of room in here. So they had a chart table and
Right.
radio gear.
Equipment and
And of course, in this day and age, everything, including what the flight engineer did, it's all concentrated onto the cockpit.
like controlled by like a.
Yeah. So we still use paper maps.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't go anywhere without paper maps.
Wow.
But we fly on Sky Demon and GPS and all the rest
Sure.
of it.
So generally you use something like this primarily, but you always have the maps with
Pilots
you.
will always have the maps open on their laps.
Batteries don't die on maps.
Exactly. So yeah, we that's always there as a fallback.
Wow.
But yeah, the GPS and the avionics on the aeroplane are probably the most modern part of the aeroplane.
Right.
But so to fly, fundamentally flying it in terms of flight controls, that hasn't changed since the prototype flew.
The way that the signal gets from the stick back to the
cables and the control surfaces. But it's got more, and the instruments. I mean, by and large, the setup's the same. There are a few additional instruments, and I doubt that any of them are the actual originals. But they follow the same pattern.
Yeah, the same sort of pattern.
And really, you're talking. I mean, obviously today here is all about DC-3s, C-47s, whatever you want to call them, Dakotas.
Hey.
But they are this aeroplane and the Dakotas are very similar. They're the same age band,
right?
Same technology,
like technology level,
same engines.
Same engines?
Yeah, so Pratt & Whitney twin Wasps. And really the cockpit, the main difference is that on a DC-3, because it's a low-wing aeroplane and the engines are low, the control runs go through the floor.
Right.
And so the engine instruments, the throttle, the propeller pitch, the mixture, they're on the floor. But because our engines are high,
it's all up here.
The controls are in the roof.
Yeah.
Right.
But other than that, that's the big fundamental difference. Other than that, they're very similar.
These are like actual control cables right here, right?
Yeah.
Like these, if you can get them right quick, I mean, you can just see that's how the control of the, I don't know if that's the tail or what specifically those cables go to.
Yeah, that's mixture. And there's some of these are linked to the engines. The big chunky ones.
Yeah.
Are the ones that go
probably up in the middle of this thing, right?
Sure.
Okay. So you can just see it. There's not a lot of like sound dampening or anything in here. This is just the skin of the aircraft. There's none at all.
Single skin. Yeah. So that's single skin. So where we are now is probably it is the noisiest part of the aeroplane.
You've got the engines right here and
you're
here.
directly in line with the props there.
There should be like a warning or something in here.
So,
does the seat cost less? Don't sell seats actually, but
don't sell seats. Yeah. So I mean, in here it is extremely noisy.
Wow.
But obviously we're wearing headphones.
Headphones, hearing protection, the whole.
Because I'm in particular as crew chief, I'm in communication with the pilot and co-pilot.
So you need to be able to.
So I'm wearing a pair of headphones. But
are you plugged in somewhere with the headphones? Are they wireless or how?
Just there, just that little.
Just right here.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. So if you move around, do you like unplug and go somewhere else?
There are two more that I can use further down the plane. So for example, when we take off, I need to check that the gear is retracted. So I will go back down there and I'll have another pair of headphones a bit further back.
Okay.
Invariably I'll use those just to say gear is up.
Right.
And I'll come back up the front.
So it's not like you have a pair of headphones on and you unplug it and run back there. There's a pair of headphones.
Do that, but
you could?
We don't need to because we have them in other places.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it really. I have a look through. If you stand up on there,
you could.
Side, you can see through and have a look at the cockpit.
All right.
But that's it really.
And what the full range of these?
So in wartime configuration, they could do in excess of 2,000 miles, so 2,200. Depends on weight. Fully fueled, they could do over 2,000, and that equates to anything around 20 hours.
Wow.
Now, that said, during the Second World War, there was a need to provide a military communication service between Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, and Perth in Western Australia, because all the land-based airfields in between those points were Japanese occupied.
Right.
And the only aeroplane that had the range to fly, admittedly with additional tanks, but the only aeroplane that had the ability to fly between those 2 points non-stop, unrefueled, at the time, was the Catalina.
Wow.
So there were 5 Catalinas that were they were RAF aircraft, registered to the forerunner of British Airways, British Overseas Airways Corporation, but flown by Qantas crews, so Australian crews, and they flew that route backwards and forwards using 5 Catalinas, and typically that was 29 hours.
Oh man!
The longest flight was, it depends how it's measured, whether it was measured from buoy to buoy, because these were not amphibians, they were pure flying boats, whether you measure it buoy from buoy or pure airborne time, but it was in the regional of 33 hours.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty vital link,
Yeah,
too, in that time of
unrefueled.
war. Right.
And then eventually they had other, well, the war came to an end, but just before the end of the war, they had other aircraft that could just do it from land base to land base, and the Catalinas were withdrawn. And that was called those flights were called the double sunrise flights.
Wow.
Right. That's what y'all said
Obviously.
earlier, yeah.
Yeah.
The double sunrise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Chad, I was just saying, if y'all have any questions for us, now's a great time to ask a couple questions. And there's a couple of them already. Are we good to ask a couple?
Excellent.
So,
I hope I can answer them.
what's the payload capacity of the plane? Like in terms of, I guess, pounds, tons? Like
Oh my gosh, what would we measure?
Number-
Jeff, what would we measure that in?
Maximum takeoff weight is 26,425 pounds, so about 12 tons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when we fly up to Germany on Thursday, we'll probably be close to that. But we actually have our plate in the cockpit here, which gives the maximum takeoff weight.
Okay.
But we have two maximum takeoff weights. We've got our low maximum takeoff weight, which is what we normally operate with.
Right.
And then when we do really long range things, be it Moscow, Greenland, Turkey, we have an upper maximum takeoff
Like a max
weight.
max.
Yeah, so that goes up to about 28,000 pounds.
Wow.
And it means that when we're going to do something like that, we speak to our insurers and say, look, we're going to Turkey. Can we up our maximum takeoff weight? They'll say, fine, the extra premium is such and such. We'll have that for the month that we do it.
Right.
And then as soon as we're back, we flip our little bark over back to its lower maximum takeoff
No.
weight. And it keeps costs under control, which
Yeah.
is one of
Because
the big
insurance on
things.
an aeroplane is based on weight.
Yeah.
And luckily, we can operate within some bigger airplanes. The Flying Fortress, for example, the B-17,
Yeah.
they can only operate in a heavier zone.
Right.
In the
They don't
one.
they don't have an option, whereas we have a cheaper option.
I'd never thought of that
No.
before. So it's not the capacity, the physical capacity, engineering capacity of the aircraft. It's like a financial thing for insurance. It just costs less to operate it at the lower maximum weight.
Otherwise, you suddenly find you're in the limit. You're in the bracket of a 737.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wartime ops, you would see aircraft being loaded up to 30,000 pounds and even more.
Wow.
And certainly the double sunrise flights that David mentioned, you'd have a horrendous fuel load on board.
Yeah.
And you'd take about, a long distance to get airborne, about 2 hours of flying in ground effect.
Right.
Before they could even start to climb.
Wow.
To then, be light enough to climb, really.
Yeah.
And then by that stage, they're hopefully climbing to go higher up for dark nighttime ops to get past the Japs.
And they said at the time that if they lost an engine at any point during the first 10 or 11 hours of the flight,
They were more heavily
they
laden.
would come down
Yeah.
because they couldn't maintain height.
Yeah.
So
We can fly this on one engine within our 26,000 pounds,
Right.
and not lose height. So,
Wow.
It's formidable. When you think about
Yeah.
what this aircraft can do.
Yeah. So another thing is there a difference between the takeoff weight for being on the water versus the land? Like if you're flying on a runway, does that
No.
change?
No, the takeoff weight, the maximum takeoff weight for land and water is the same.
Is the same.
The landing weight, we can land with a maximum takeoff weight on land, but we have to reduce weight if we're coming back on water.
Ah.
So there's little variations there.
There's
But
like
it's very good. You take off an aircraft, a lot of aircraft cannot land straight away.
Right.
They've got to burn off fuel.
You're going to burn off fuel.
But we can come straight back in.
Wow.
So we've got that advantage on land.
Okay.
and we still put this on water. So,
Yeah.
we were out in France 3 or 4 weeks ago doing a quick bit of training, so 3 days down there. And a nice number of landings. It was
Yeah.
very fun.
Very cool. Let's see here. Was it able to refuel at sea? So did they drive it up next to a ship and
the
refuel
answer
it?
is yes.
That's
There were
what-
things called seaplane tenders.
Right.
And they would service seaplanes. They could actually hoist them on board with a crane, one or maybe two at a time. Depends how big the tenders were. Some of them
Right.
were quite large. So we're not talking about aircraft carriers here, but we're talking about basic, standard ships, big cranes. But yeah, they could refuel them. So the answer to that one's yes.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I would never thought of.
Mainly the Americans that did that, US Navy.
Okay.
I've got a lovely photo of the USS Thetis taking about 8 Catalinas, a number of Grumman ducks back to the States for overhaul.
Right.
And they're all on this flat top. and it looks like an aircraft carrier, but it didn't work as an aircraft.
They didn't
carrier.
land on it,
had
it was
these
just-
huge derricks.
Yeah.
And there's a huge hook on the top here
Yeah.
that you just pick the aircraft up and plonk it on top.
So that would serve almost. It could serve as a mobile.
Yes.
A mobile base for
Yeah,
if
sure.
there was
Yeah.
heavy
Yeah.
operations somewhere.
Yeah, and the US Navy did that quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No kidding. I was so interested. I wasn't even scrolling through questions.
Yeah.
Let's see here. It was also used for water rescue, I guess.
Yes, it was. Not so much by the RAF. So obviously, we kind of have a interest in the Royal Air Force.
Sure,
because of
sure.
the country we are. The RAF didn't tend to use them a great deal, but for air sea rescue. But certainly the US Navy did, the United States Army Air Force did, and various other users, the Australians did.
Okay.
So it was, and quite long range. Because the difficulty there is if you're going out long range to pick a downed airman up or whoever, the chances are the sea state is not going to be very
Right.
conducive.
Nice out there.
So,
Yeah.
it was pretty tough doing that sort of thing. Very difficult.
Yeah.
And they lost quite a few Catalinas on rescue missions where they'd gone out to rescue people and ended up either losing their own lives or having to be rescued themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's interesting, if you've got a moment, there's an interesting story. This aeroplane is painted to represent the United States Army Air Force aircraft that was based in Suffolk, UK, so the next county from here,
Right.
as an air sea rescue aircraft in 1945. So this one is painted to represent that
To
aircraft.
represent that. Okay.
And at the end of March 45, it flew out onto the North Sea to pick up a Mustang pilot who'd been shot down. And when they landed, one of their engines packed up, so they couldn't rescue the poor guy.
Packed up like it.
It failed.
It failed.
So they couldn't go anywhere. So they ended up staying on the water overnight.
Wow.
And then the following morning, a Luftwaffe German jet, Messerschmitt 262, came along and shot them to pieces. Well, to pieces. Sufficiently to sink the aeroplane.
Wow.
The crew took to the life rafts, so then they were the rescuers that then needed to be rescued, and they were eventually rescued by a lifeboat and brought back to the UK. So it's an interesting story.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
So that original aircraft was called Miss Pickup.
Miss
Which
Pickup.
has kind of got a double meaning, obviously. Won't
Yeah.
go too much into that. And so
Right.
that's why this airplane is painted to represent
painted with
that
Miss
aircraft.
Pickup on the side.
Because A, it's a good story. B, the original airplane was white, and it's nice to have a bright white
Right.
airplane. And C, because just over the back there, the American Air Force Museum, there's a whole series of glass panels, and engraved on those panels is a silhouette for every United States 8th Air Force aircraft that was lost in the Second World War.
Oh wow.
There
Whoa.
are 2 Catalina silhouettes on there.
Really?
And one of them represents the original Miss Pickup.
Wow.
We went through there yesterday. We didn't know.
Didn't notice
Yeah.
that.
We went
Yeah.
right by it.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So we thought it's kind of got a resonance by painting the airplane to represent that aircraft.
Sure. Sure. Wow.
So there's a technical question here as well. Something about a zinc chromate finish.
Oh yeah, okay. So when you build,
I just tossed that out there. I figured you might know.
I can
Yeah.
answer that one.
Yeah.
When you build although Jeff will correct me if I get it wrong. When you build an airplane from this aircraft is built from something called duralumin,
Okay.
which is a type of aluminium. So when you build it, it's all shiny and bright, but it's got no protection at all.
Right.
So before you paint it, whatever colour you're going to paint it, you first of all paint it with green zinc chromate primer. Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't have to, it's generally green.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
The normal colour, but inside and out.
Right.
So, for example, if you build a brand new Airbus, or I guess a Boeing, whatever,
Right.
Yep.
when it rolls off the production
Yep,
line,
it's green.
It'll be green.
It's green.
And that's zinc chromate primer.
Yeah.
Okay.
We see that in where I live in Seattle.
Okay.
When they bring in the
Sure.
737
Yep.
fuselages from Missouri.
Yep.
They're all in green.
And that's zinc chromate primer. And then they're sprayed up.
Yep.
They'll go to a spray shop and
Right.
they'll have goodness knows how much weight the paint is, but sprayed on. Yeah. So that answers that one.
Yeah, no, that was a very
Impressive.
specific question. I didn't know, but we actually have people that work on aircraft
Yeah,
and
sure.
that sort of stuff in chat right now.
Yeah.
There was a Clico moment at one point. Y'all call them Clicos over here?
No.
No?
That is-
The little temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were on one restoration hangar talking about some restoration aircraft, and somebody in chat said, "Oh, ask them if they have any Clicos."
Okay.
And I'm like, I don't know what a Clico is. That like a bad word in a foreign language or something? And so I tossed it out to the guy guys restoring the aircraft. They're like, oh, Clecos, yeah. So
What is it?
Clico, so if you think about where you're going to put a rivet through, all the panels you'll hold together with these Clecos.
Okay.
And then you can remove the Cleco, put your rivet through.
Okay.
What they used to use in CATs when they went out in ops were lead pencils.
Lead pencils.
Because if you popped a rivet, you'd shove a lead pencil in to fill the hole, so as the plane didn't fill with water.
yeah.
So they couldn't put Clecos in
Always a good
because you
thing.
need it from both sides.
Right.
So the lead pencil did the trick.
You could do a lead.
Wow. One of those crazy.
So even that sort of thing, like it's just a Cleco story because we were talking about the finish in here, and then all of a sudden we learned how they plug a hole in it.
Yeah.
That's amazing
It
stuff.
is, and while I think of it, because it's just come into my head, an interesting story. So the Royal Air Force, the last surviving, i.e. living, holder of the Victoria Cross, which is the highest award for gallantry.
Right.
The last surviving RAF holder of the Victoria Cross, he gained the Victoria Cross flying a Catalina during the Second World War. And about 5 years ago, we took him flying in this aeroplane.
Wow.
That was just an amazing experience.
I bet.
So, yeah, it was really good. And he's still alive. He's 99 now. So he was in his mid-90s when he flew with us.
No
And he
kidding.
just sat down the back. He didn't come up to the cockpit.
Sure.
But, he sat in the blister area.
You just hung out.
And we flew him. We didn't take him underwater, which is what he would have been used to.
Sure.
Because he was operating on water. But we flew him from a place in Scotland called Lucas up to the River Tay, where there used to be a wartime RAF Catalina base. And I don't think he was actually stationed there, but I'm sure he would have been there at some stage. So we flew him up there, and that was great.
I think he definitely earned the luxury ride. You know?
Yeah, so that was a good experience.
Yeah.
Good to be involved in. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm actually interested I'm the historian with this group, and so I'm always interested in how people get connected to this, their personal history to this. How did you get interested in this particular plane enough to the point that you're where you're
So I kind of had an interest in the type because it's an unusual aeroplane, it's iconic, and I went to British Columbia in the mid-70s, and there were a load of Catalina water bombers at Victoria on Vancouver Island, and I specifically trekked out there to see them. So I kind of had that background of, it's a nice aeroplane, I really like them. And then in 1984, a small group of people decided to buy one in South Africa, bring it to the UK and fly air shows. And they put a little notice in one of the big selling aviation magazines in this country saying, this is what's happening, we want to put a team together that will go to air shows and help look after it. And I showed that to my wife and I said, hey, that sounds pretty good, I'd like to do that. And like a fool, she said, you must do that.
You must do that.
So that was 1984.
Wow.
Here we are in 2019, and I've been with the organisation continuously all that time. The first aeroplane I mentioned earlier, we lost in an accident. So
Right.
There was that kind of hiatus of about 3 years where we didn't have an aeroplane, but because of the contribution I make to the organisation, which one of those contributions is writing the supporters magazine that I mentioned earlier on. So I kind of carried on regardless, as if nothing had happened, just to wait to see what was going to happen. And after a while, it was decided that we'd buy a replacement Catalina, but it would be operated on a wholly different basis, so shareholders, rather than 2 or 3 people taking all the responsibility.
Gotcha.
So I just kind of changed gear then and started flying.
Here you are.
And here I am. All those years later, what's that, 34 years?
Wow.
So I've pretty much continuously been flying. And I've flown in other Catalinas around the world as well at various times. Not as a crew member, but just because I know people.
Yeah, because you know people.
So I flew in East Africa in one for a short while in '92, which was good fun.
So first time you saw one, you were how old?
So the first time I physically saw one was in '77 when I was 22.
Okay, but you'd loved them since you were a kid.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Someone who lived just down the road from me, her father had made a metal scale model one during the war.
Okay.
And it was kind of chucked in their shed. And I can remember as a kid going around, saying, hey, that's a Catalina. I'd always had an awareness of the type. It's quite unusual. It's a seaplane. It had the gun turrets at the back, which are very
Right.
distinctive.
It's very distinctive,
floats.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it is an iconic aeroplane. And I just got interested in them, and then having got involved with this organisation, the interest then just took up a whole new level.
Yeah.
So I've written about them, I've researched them, I'm in contact with people all over the globe, almost
amazing.
daily. Some of them.
Wow.
So it's just,
The Catalina enthusiast club or
Yeah.
something like.
yeah, exactly. It's
incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I suppose you call it the Catalina community.
Yeah, Catalina community. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Catalina community. Where is the aircraft based at?
Here.
Here.
This is our
Oh,
base.
this is your base.
This is
okay.
our base.
So y'all
Duxford
didn't
is,
fly in for the show.
No,
You're
no.
here at Duxford.
That's exactly. So when we first started out, so in the first one arrived in '85, and for a while we were based in Lincolnshire, which
Right.
is 100 miles up the road from here, 120. But for various reasons, it just wasn't practical, and we had the opportunity fairly early on to come here. So around 1989. We moved here with the original aeroplane, and it's been fantastic. It's a brilliant place to base an aeroplane because it's fairly central in the country,
Right.
a bit to the south, but so people can get here. But there's so much expertise concentrated here, as you probably realised already, not just in our team, but in other teams as well.
Yeah.
And it's just a great place to base ourselves. So we have a very good relationship with the Imperial War Museum, who run the place. And it works. It works for us. We've got hangarage, so whether that translates to American. But
Sure. I mean, I know what it means. Yeah.
So we're able to keep the airplane undercover in the winter, which is great. Most of the summer it spends outside. So it works really well for us.
Gotcha.
Great place to be.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I think we have taken up like almost an hour of your time at this
Well,
point.
that's my pleasure.
I appreciate it.
We absolutely appreciate
I hope it
you.
was of interest.
Yeah.
Well, it's a remarkably versatile airplane, and
Yes.
one of the reasons I asked about the range, the first time I encountered them was when I learned about the Battle of Midway as a kid.
Sure.
And they played such a vital role in that. The U.S. Navy sent out a fan of sort of a half circle of these planes out to try to find the Japanese fleet. And if you don't know anything about that operation, the Japanese were intending to surprise the U.S. again with the attack on Midway, but the U.S. had picked up on what the objective was and had snuck out a couple of aircraft carriers, and so knew they were coming. But the Japanese didn't know that we knew they were coming, and so they sent out a number of Catalinas to try to find them and visually verify them and radio back to Midway, because they were based at Midway. Radio back to Midway where they were, and sure enough, they did find them.
Yeah.
And in carrier battles in the Pacific, more often than not, whoever saw each other first was probably going to get in the most damage. And so this was such a vital thing. And so that whole thing, even though everybody remembers the loss of 4 aircraft carriers and the first major U.S. victory against the Japanese, it started because Catalinas went out and found those ships and were able to identify them. And
Wow.
so for me, that was the strawberry flight, they called it. That was their call sign.
Yes.
And so for me, when I think of this aircraft, every time I see it, I think of the strawberry flight in that sense. Yeah.
And in the UK, people would tend to think of the Catalina linked with the Bismarck because
Right.
the Catalina initially found the Bismarck on its
Right.
way out of Norway and shadowed it, and then another Catalina took over.
Right.
So we
But-
kind of have a slightly different
But the
perspective.
story doesn't end there, because not only were the Cats responsible for Midway and the Bismarck, but it was the Catalina that spotted the Japanese fleet in the Indian Ocean.
That's
So
right.
You've got that.
That's right.
So,
You've got the Atlantic, you've got the Pacific, you've got
Yeah.
the Indian.
All over the
That's
map.
right.
Yeah,
It's the Catalina again.
Yeah.
So,
Leonard Burchell, who was the pilot who was flying the Catalina in the Indian Ocean, he became known as the saviour of Ceylon
Oh, wow.
because they spotted the fleet
Yeah.
and were able to radio back and say, "Hey guys, it's coming." And of course, Ceylon wasn't invaded,
Right.
which is why they were then able to use Ceylon or Sri Lanka as the starting point for the double sunrise flights,
Right.
because it was still in Allied hands.
And from the Japanese side, some of the carriers that launched aircraft at Pearl Harbor ended up launching aircraft in the Ceylon operation as well.
But what you said earlier on, I think you used the word versatility, and that is why there are Catalina survived into the 60s, 70s, 80s, because it is such a versatile airplane. So they could use them for aerial survey, geophysical survey, water bombing. So a lot of them survived.
Yeah.
There's about a dozen airworthy in the world now.
Wow.
This one is the busiest.
Yeah.
It flies more than any other.
So it's one of one of 12 aircraft like this that can still fly, Chad.
Plus or minus
Roughly,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on what day it is,
Yeah,
whether the
exactly.
parts came in.
Yeah.
Like,
It's amazing.
Yeah. There's one on its way to the States as we speak.
right?
Yeah, it was operated in Holland for a few years, and it's now been purchased by an American operation. So it's probably
Collins.
what day are we today?
Where?
Monday.
Collins Foundation.
Oh, Collins bought it.
Yeah.
Do you
so
know where they're basing it?
I think initially it's going to New Smyrna Beach for an overhaul.
Okay.
Okay.
And then they're going to put a nose turret on it, and I think they're based in Massachusetts.
I think so.
I believe.
Okay.
So I think
It's gonna go-
today's Monday. I think it's in Greenland.
All right.
It was in Reykjavik.
There
it was in
you go.
Reykjavik. It was in
Find it,
Reykjavik.
chat. See where it
Yeah,
is.
It was in Reykjavik this weekend.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think
awesome.
I really appreciate the time, guys.
Yeah, thank
This
you.
is amazing, like to sit here and just capture y'all's experience with the aircraft. I mean, we appreciate you keeping this thing flying from not only the financial perspective, but also just the time that it takes. Taking time away from their wife to come over here to the air shortage. I mean, I know my wife watches the show and I know what it is, but we really do appreciate the time y'all took, not only with us, but the time it takes to keep this in the
I
air.
think you've probably gathered by now that we enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's infectious. It really is.
It really
That's
is.
the amazing thing about this whole thing.
Yeah.
And, so it gives you the chance to tell the story of a plane that people obviously always notice,
Yep.
but don't always know what to do with or what it did. And so I think learning the story, they learn a lot in a short period of time. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
Okay.
So we will go ahead and egress from your aircraft here.
Yep.
We're going to
And
egress.
when we get out to
Big
the back
word.
chat, we'll do one more thing. I want to put their donation link up again. If you have a couple bucks to spare or something like that, and you want to do a donation to help them keep this aircraft in the air, the link will be in chat so you can help out with that sort of stuff. So again, they were awesome. They allowed us to come on board here. They allowed us to share this with you. Let's give back a little bit and help support their effort to keep the aircraft flying.